The grand chamber of species shimmered beneath twin suns, each beam refracted through sheets of crystal that curved like frozen lightning. Thousands of alien delegates whispered in a dozen dialects, a hive of glittering eyes and venomous diplomacy. The air smelled faintly of ozone and arrogance. They had gathered to discuss what they called the human problem, a species too small, too stubborn, too inconvenient to be erased without consequence. At the center, the Chancellor of the Galactic Council banged a staff of authority against the dais. The room fell into a trembling silence that tasted like static before a storm. The Earth species, the Chancellor began, his translucent throat pulsing, has once again ignored Article 7 of the Non-Expansion Accord. Their machines have entered the Virelin Belt. We must decide how to contain them, permanently. Containment. That word always sounded noble in alien mouths. It meant extermination, but with paperwork. A velar noble with emerald scales hissed. They're primitives. Their technology leaks fire instead of plasma. Why do we waste time? A Mithra philosopher clicked her mandibles thoughtfully. Because fire spreads, Lord Velar. And humans are fond of spreading. Laughter rippled through the tiers like lazy thunder. It died abruptly when the great doors opened. The sound was wrong, too solid, too heavy for a civilization that prided itself on floating cities and soundless elevators. Metal shrieked against marble. Then came a low rumble, rhythmic and alive, like something breathing smoke. A human woman walked in. She wasn't escorted, nor invited. She moved with the calm of someone who had stopped asking permission centuries ago. Her combat suit was a patchwork of carbon and ash, its surface scarred with plasma burns and alien sigils. Her boots left a thin trail of blood, not hers, on the floor that glowed faintly from the heat of entry. She stopped just inside the circle of power, glanced around as if arriving late to a company meeting and muttered, "Sorry about the mess outside. Traffic on the Orion spurs murder today." Silence stretched so long it bent time. "Identify yourself," the Chancellor demanded. She gave a small smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Lieutenant Colonel Helena Vostrikov. Call me Baba Yaga. Everyone does eventually." A nervous murmur spread through the hall. The name had drifted through military channels for years, half legend, half classified horror story. The human who commanded tanks that thought, who made planets surrender without firing twice. Helena set down a dented coffee mug on the marble rail. It read, "World's Best Mom," the letters smeared with soot. She brushed a speck of ash from her sleeve with the politeness of someone tidying before an interview. A Draxian warlord stood, his armor creaking. "You have violated the sanctum of this council. Outside, your vehicles have surrounded the moon." "Oh, those," she said mildly. "They get restless if I leave them alone. I told them to stay, but they have separation anxiety." Her voice carried that human cadence, casual, humorous, utterly confident. Beneath it was steel. The kind you only heard once before the end. A dozen guards raised their rifles. The Chancellor lifted a trembling hand. "You will disarm, human. You are outnumbered." Helena tilted her head. "Funny thing about numbers. Depends how you count." She tapped her wrist pad. The floor vibrated. A slow mechanical growl rolled through the chamber as orbiting satellites shifted position. Every delegate's data link blinked once, then died. The translation feeds cut off mid-sentence. The aliens found themselves suddenly deaf, isolated in their own tongues. Helena sipped from her mug. "That's better. We can all speak honestly now." Panic flickered across the chamber. Velar claws clicked. Mithra drones buzzed. The Draxian warlord flexed his massive arms but didn't move. Even predators knew when something higher on the food chain had entered the room. Helena's gaze softened, almost apologetic. "You call Earth a problem. Maybe you're right. But the problem with problems is, if you ignore them long enough, they start solving you." A ripple of fear moved like cold wind through the ranks. The Chancellor steadied himself. "Humanity's aggression endangers galactic peace. We seek dialogue, not destruction." Helena chuckled quietly. "Dialogue's nice. My tanks tried talking once. The translation software burned out after the first scream. For a heartbeat, she seemed distant, eyes reflecting the ghosts of battles only she could see. Then she straightened, all business again. I'm not here to threaten anyone. I'm here because someone kept poking Earth with sticks labeled research and peacekeeping. We noticed. From somewhere outside, a deep metallic roar echoed through the thin lunar atmosphere. Windows trembled. Alien attendants scattered toward the exits, only to find them sealed. Helena continued, calm as a teacher explaining an equation. Those are UN Peace Division Mark XII tanks. We sent 12 to the Varellan Belt after your navies bombed our colony outposts. 11 came back. The 12th, well, it's parked outside with your flags welded to its hull. I thought the council might want to sign it. The Mithra delegate whispered, why bring war machines to a peace summit? Helena smiled faintly. Habit. Her humor was disarming, almost charming, until one realized how deliberate it was. She used it the way snipers used wind, calculating every laugh before it arrived. The Chancellor tried again. You claim humanity seeks peace. Yet you arrive bleeding war. Helena took another sip. We prefer peace. We're just very, very good at Plan B. Something in her tone cracked the room's composure. The Draxian warlord lowered his gaze. Even his kind knew the scent of inevitability. The Mithra drones began to hum in distress, a collective murmur of instinctual retreat. Then the lights dimmed. Outside the vast windows, orbiting shapes emerged, hulking silhouettes of tanks, their hulls still marked by alien glyphs and scorch lines. Some rotated slowly, still dripping coolant and blood that vaporized into glitter. Others aimed skyward, silent as waiting wolves. Helena didn't look. She already knew the view. You built this council to keep the galaxy civil, she said softly. Earth joined to learn from you. Instead, we learned what civility looks like when it's afraid of getting dirty. Her words landed with surgical precision. The Chancellor trembled. Are you threatening the Council of Species? She met his gaze without blinking. No. Threats imply uncertainty. She leaned forward, voice barely above a whisper. I'm promising you. In the hush that followed, the entire hall seemed to hold its breath. Outside, one of the blood-stained tanks turned its cannon slightly, as if glancing through the glass. Helena finished her coffee, set the mug down beside the staff of authority, and stood. Now then, she said with a bright diplomatic smile, shall we begin the peace talks? No one answered. Even the lights seemed reluctant to resume their glow. Somewhere in the far distance, the echo of marching metal began again, steady, patient, inevitable. And as the sound grew closer, every alien in that chamber finally understood why the stories called her Baba Yaga. The chamber's silence was so dense it felt alive, a creature crouched between every nervous breath. Helena stood in the center like gravity itself, hands clasped behind her back, posture casual yet unyielding. Her eyes drifted over the gathered delegates, predators pretending at civility, empires hiding behind etiquette, and the faintest smile tugged at her mouth. The smile of a woman who had already done the math and didn't mind the answer. The Chancellor recovered first. You enter without invitation, disrupt communication systems and flaunt weapons of war before the Council, he said, voice trembling with the weight of self-importance. This is not diplomacy, human. It's desecration. Helena tilted her head, pretending to consider his words. Maybe. Though, to be fair, the last time you invited humans, you used the term observation mission. That was just before 3 colonies disappeared under something you called a containment maneuver. Forgive me for skipping the invitation this time. Murmurs rippled through the tiers, some scandalized, others silent in uneasy agreement. The Mithra drones buzzed with static, their translation filaments flickering. The Velar noble hissed, his forked tongue brushing his fangs. You cannot prove such accusations. The Varellan incidents were local rebellions. Helena reached into her armor and set a small device on the marble floor. It projected a cascade of images, charred landscapes, broken cities, the hollow eyes of human settlers who never made it home. You called those local rebellions, too, she said. Funny how that phrase translates across galaxies. The projection filled the air with soft blue light that flickered against her face. For a heartbeat, her expression softened. Something maternal, grieving, deeply human, but it vanished just as quickly. "I'm not here for revenge," she continued. "I'm here for the truth. And truth, Chancellor, doesn't need an invitation either." A low vibration pulsed through the floor. The Draxian warlord leaned forward, thick claws scraping his chair. "Your kind plays at war like children playing with knives," he rumbled. "If you seek justice, you'll find it at the edge of my blade." Helena's smile didn't waver. "Blades are outdated. Ours talk louder." Outside the chamber windows, a formation of human tanks slowly pivoted, their turrets glinting under the twin suns. The movement was slow, deliberate, a gesture rather than a threat. Yet the sound of it, that deep mechanical growl echoing through atmosphere, carried the certainty of extinction. Helena looked back at the Draxian, voice mild. "They say violence is the last refuge of the incompetent. But I've found it's also the fastest way to end a boring meeting." Laughter, nervous, uncertain, bubbled from a few corners of the room. It was crushed by the Chancellor's glare. Human insolence has limits. You stand before the oldest civilizations in the galaxy, each capable of ending your species in a breath. "Then take one," Helena said gently. The Chancellor froze. Her tone hadn't risen. It wasn't defiant, it was patient, as though she were offering him a choice he'd already declined too many times. "Do it," she added. "You've been trying for years. Bioplagues, trade embargoes, assassinations disguised as diplomacy. The funny thing about humans, we don't vanish when you kill us. We multiply in memory." She took a few steps closer to the dais. Her boots clicked softly, each sound marking the rhythm of control. "You think of humanity as a mistake that somehow learned to shoot back. But you forget, we learned from you. Every empire that enslaved us, every experiment you ran in secret, every treaty you broke, we took notes." The Mithra delegate lifted a trembling forelimb. "You misunderstand. We sought to guide, not to exploit." Helena interrupted, her voice velvet over steel. "You studied our wars, our art, our humor, and called it pathology. You called our kindness weakness. You measured empathy like a toxin. And still, we welcomed you." The Mithra's compound eyes shimmered, but she said nothing. Helena leaned against the podium, her reflection fractured across the glass. "We sent poets into your archives, scientists into your universities, children into your peace academies. Do you know what they found?" The Chancellor straightened. "Enlightenment, I presume." "Recipes," Helena said, smiling faintly. "For war. The same ingredients, greed, fear, and paperwork. You've perfected bureaucracy as a weapon." That earned a few bitter chuckles from alien corners long oppressed by the Council's laws. The sound made the Chancellor twitch. Power, Helena knew, was like blood. It smelled fear long before it spilled. She gestured toward the tanks beyond the glass. "You call those machines monsters. But they're mirrors. They show you what you'd rather pretend you outgrew." The Draxian snarled, pounding the marble with one massive fist. "You threaten peace." "No," Helena said softly. "I remind it who keeps it." A strange quiet settled again. The chamber lights flickered as if the building itself held its breath. Helena took another sip from her coffee mug, now cracked along the rim. "You know what the problem is with peace? It's only noble until somebody else dies for it." Her voice lowered, deliberate, almost tender. "On Earth, we call that hypocrisy. Out here, you call it governance." The Chancellor's translucent skin flushed violet. "Enough," he said, rising. "You will be detained until we decide your fate." Helena exhaled through her nose as though mildly disappointed in a slow student. "You still think you're running this meeting?" She tapped the table once. Every hollow screen around the chamber flared to life, broadcasting from dozens of alien homeworlds. On each, crowds of beings watched in real time. Their leaders, these very council members, now appeared on public record, cornered by one human woman. "Broadcast initiated," said a soft voice from her wristpad. The tanks outside had been recording since she arrived. Helena's eyes gleamed. Congratulations, counselors. You're trending across 9 sectors. Pandemonium erupted. Delegates shouted, their voices overlapping in fury and terror. Some demanded the signal be cut, others lunged toward her, but the security systems refused to obey. She hadn't hacked their network. She'd rewritten it before they noticed. She spoke over the chaos, voice calm and crystalline. You called for a hearing about humanity's crimes. Good news, we're holding it now. The jury just tuned in. The Draxian advanced, muscles rippling, eyes blazing with primitive rage. I'll silence you myself. Helena didn't move. Careful. My tanks are very protective. They don't like shouting. He hesitated just long enough for the sound to reach them. The deep rumble of charging cannons. Red light bled through the chamber windows, staining the floor like liquid dawn. She looked at him with gentle pity. See? They think you're yelling at their mom. The Draxian stopped, chest heaving. Slowly, the light outside dimmed again. Helena lifted her cup, inspecting the fading steam. We can keep pretending this is a council meeting, or we can admit what it really is, a negotiation between predators. The Chancellor's voice trembled. And what is it you want, human? She looked up, her expression unreadable. I want the truth. I want acknowledgement. I want you to say on record that humanity isn't a mistake in your grand experiment, that we're the consequence of it. The words landed heavy, reverberating in the stunned silence that followed. Even the tanks outside seemed to wait. Finally, the Chancellor whispered, "And if we refuse?" Helena smiled. Not cruelly, but with infinite patience, like a parent indulging a child's final question before bedtime. Then, she said softly, the tanks stopped waiting. No one in the chamber moved. The air itself seemed to shrink, folding inward beneath the weight of her words. Helena stood at the center of the room, motionless but radiant with intent. The faint hum of the holograms filled the silence, the sound of every empire's eyes upon them. Her tanks orbited in formation beyond the glass, glinting like slow, red stars. The delegate's fear had ripened into something sharper. Recognition. The Chancellor's hand trembled as it reached for the console. "End the transmission," he whispered. His aide obeyed, but the lights on the console blinked once and died. Helena didn't even glance their way. "I'm afraid you can't," she said. "Your security network is running a more recent firmware. Ours." A surge of angry voices filled the air. Some pleaded for calm, others shouted for guards. But the doors had already sealed. The Mithra drones began to swarm upward, buzzing in disarray, their wings shimmering in alarm. The Draxian warlord reached for his blade. "Enough of this farce," he roared, rising to his full, monstrous height. Helena sighed softly, almost sympathetic. "I told you, shouting makes them nervous." From outside came a deep rolling thunder, the synchronized growl of tanks locking targets. The chamber vibrated as one of the massive machines rotated its cannon toward the viewing deck. The Draxian froze mid-step. His blade remained half-drawn, the metallic scrape fading into silence. Helena lifted a hand, palm open. "Sit," she said simply. He hesitated, then obeyed, sinking back into his seat like a reprimanded god. For a moment it felt absurd. This small, soot-marked human commanding the apex of a dozen civilizations. Yet there was no doubt, no uncertainty in her tone. Authority didn't cling to her. It radiated from her like gravity. The Chancellor swallowed hard. "You cannot possibly believe this will end well for your kind." Helena turned toward him, expression calm. "End well? Oh, Chancellor, you misunderstand. It already ended. You just didn't notice." She gestured to the holographic feeds above them. They flickered through images of alien fleets, Velar cruisers drifting silent and cold, Mithra colonies under quarantine, Draxian carriers burning in atmosphere. "These are the coordinates of every world that signed the containment accords. My tanks didn't come here alone. They came as beacons." The Chancellor's throat pulsed. "Beacons for what?" Helena's smile was almost kind. For accountability. The projection expanded, revealing Earth's fleet, the UN Peace Division, materializing across dozens of sectors. Each ship bore the same insignia, a white olive branch over a steel fist. It was not an invasion. It was a reckoning. The chamber erupted. The Velar noble lunged forward, hissing. "You tricked us." "Did I?" Helena asked mildly. "Or did you trick yourselves? You invited a human to your table expecting a child with a gun. You got a civilization with a memory." The Mithra delegate quivered, her mandibles clicking. "You would destabilize the entire galaxy over revenge?" Helena's eyes softened, her voice low. "Not revenge. Balance." She reached for her mug, still warm somehow, and took a sip. "You've mistaken our patience for weakness. Humans don't rush. We study. We endure. And when we finally stand up, we've already built the weapon." Her words landed like quiet detonations. The aliens exchanged desperate glances. A few muttered to one another in their native tongues, trying to calculate the scale of what was happening. Helena gave them no reprieve. "You think of humanity as reckless," she continued. "You see our humor, our chaos, our arguments, and you think we lack discipline. But tell me, who else could build beauty out of fear? Who else could laugh under bombardment? Who else would paint poetry on bombs and name them after their children?" Her voice had gone cold now, but beneath the chill was pain, old, enduring pain. "We don't enjoy war. We remember it. That's why we win." The Draxian warlord leaned forward, his tone softer this time. "If your fleets fire, we all burn. Even you." Helena nodded. "Maybe. But we'll burn last. And history always listens to the last one speaking." The Mithra delegate fluttered her wings anxiously. "There must be another way. A truce. A restoration." Helena looked at her with something that might have been pity. "There's always another way. You just never choose it until it's too late." She paced slowly, each step echoing like a clock. "Do you know why Earth sent me?" No one answered. She smiled faintly. "Because I'm polite. Because I say please and thank you before the storm. And because when I arrive, it's already too late for anyone else to arrive after me." She stopped before the Chancellor's throne. "You've spent centuries building this council. You think that gives you the right to decide who's civilized and who's expendable. But civilization isn't a council. It's a memory of what you choose not to destroy." The Chancellor's composure cracked. The glow beneath his translucent skin flickered. "You are monsters," he whispered. Helena leaned close enough that he could smell the smoke in her hair. "We learn from the best." For a moment, neither spoke. The only sound was the steady hum of the tanks outside, orbiting like faithful beasts. Then Helena straightened and turned to the crowd. "Listen carefully. Earth isn't here to conquer you. We're here to teach you manners." The words rippled through the hall like a physical force. The Mithra recoiled. The Velar hissed curses under their breath. The Draxian only stared, silent and pale. "You'll find new protocols in your systems," Helena continued. "Human ethics algorithms, empathy models, cost-of-life calculations. We've installed them across the Council's AI networks. Every fleet, every command chain, every weapon you own now asks one question before it fires." The Chancellor clenched his fists. "What question?" Helena met his gaze. Would a human pull the trigger? The realization spread slowly, like ink in water. The Council's armies were still armed, but their will was no longer their own. "You can override it, of course," she added lightly. "It just takes, well, a human heart rate." She tapped her chest once. 90 beats a minute. Give or take. The Velar noble hissed in disbelief. "You've enslaved our fleets." Helena tilted her head. "Enslaved? No. We've just given them a conscience. You might try it sometime." An uproar followed. Cries of treason, panic, fury. The lights flickered again as her tanks transmitted the final phase of the override. Through the glass, they could see the stars aligning, a geometric pattern blooming across the void. A map of every weapon system now bound by human restraint. Helena turned toward the exit. You have choices to make. I'd start with honesty. She paused at the door, her silhouette framed by the pulsing light of distant detonations. This wasn't an attack. This was a lesson. Her voice softened, almost kind again. The universe forgot what fear feels like. We're just reminding it how to be careful. Behind her, the council chamber stood frozen, thousands of eyes fixed on the woman who had turned an empire into a classroom. Then, from somewhere outside, one of the tanks rumbled, a deep resonant sound like laughter through metal. Helena smiled without turning back. "And class," she murmured, "is just getting started." The chamber reeked of fear and ozone. Every light pulsed dimly, as though the room itself were holding its breath. The holograms of conquered sectors flickered above the delegates, bathing their faces in hues of fire and frost. Some looked defiant, most looked hollow. The once mighty council of species, architects of galactic law, now sat like pupils before a teacher they never intended to meet. At the center of it all stood Helena, Baba Yaga of Earth, her armor cracked, her mug chipped, her shadow longer than any flag they had ever raised. She didn't speak at first. She just looked at them, one by one. The Chancellor couldn't meet her eyes. The Draxian warlord stared in silence, his blade still at his side, but his pulse trembling visibly through his translucent armor. The Mithra drones hovered in jittery formation, unsure whether to flee or prey. Helena broke the silence with a soft laugh, gentle, disbelieving, almost human again. "You know," she said, "we used to dream of being part of this council. My grandmother told stories about it when she worked the ore fields on Luna. She said it meant unity, progress, peace." She turned her mug in her hands, studying the cracked letters. "But now I see it for what it really is, an illusion built on compliance and fear." The Chancellor lifted his head, voice trembling but sharp. "You're no better. You arrive with guns, override our fleets, and call it justice." Helena looked at him, eyes faintly tired. "No. I call it balance." She walked slowly toward the grand viewport that overlooked the council moon's orbit. Beyond it, thousands of ships now floated motionless, alien and human alike, locked in uneasy silence, the reflection of starlight painting them ghost-white. "You taught the galaxy that fear keeps the peace. You were right. You just miscalculated whose fear it would be." The Velar noble slammed his clawed fist onto the marble. "You can't rule through terror forever." Helena turned, her voice calm but serrated. "We don't rule through terror. We rule through memory. Terror fades, memory adapts." She took a slow step forward, and the floor sensors beneath her boots whispered alive, tracing her movements in faint gold light. "Humans aren't trying to conquer you. We're trying to stop the cycle. We've seen this movie before, the empires, the arrogance, the belief that the universe bends toward whoever shouts the loudest. We buried those lessons under dust and headstones back home. And yet here you are, repeating them with better special effects." Her humor, light, self-aware, deadly precise, landed like a knife wrapped in velvet. The Mithra delegate finally spoke, her voice trembling through layered harmonics. "If you believe in balance, why install control into our systems? Why make slaves of our fleets?" Helena tilted her head. "Because I don't trust apologies made under duress. You'll thank me when your own admirals stop glassing civilian moons." She gave a small shrug. "Consider it a galactic driver's license. You can still steer, just not through pedestrians." A ripple of reluctant laughter escaped one of the smaller delegates, a trembling aquatic creature from the rim worlds. It was quickly silenced by the Chancellor's glare. Helena's lips curved slightly.
"See?
Someone gets it." Then her tone dropped, the levity gone. "But don't mistake control for cruelty. I didn't come here to enslave you. I came to teach you restraint, the same restraint it took for me to walk in here and not burn this council to ash." Her voice lingered, soft but resonant. The tanks outside adjusted formation, their motion slow, synchronized, almost reverent. The shadows of their cannons stretched across the chamber like cathedral pillars. The Draxian warlord rose again, slower this time, his voice rumbling like a storm kept barely in check. "And what of us who fought beside you? We defended your colonies against the Jaquel incursion. We bled for your species. Helena met his gaze. And you were betrayed by the same council that betrayed us. She reached into a compartment on her armor and drew out a small metal cube, an old data core, scorched around the edges. We found this in the ruins of your homeworld's outpost. It's council-signed. Proof that your people were sacrificed to stabilize trade routes. The warlord took the cube in trembling claws. His eyes glowed with fury, then dimmed with shame. We thought it was the humans, he whispered. That's how they kept us divided, Helena said softly. They fed us lies and sold us peace in ration packs. But peace built on silence always rots. The Mithra delegate whispered something to the others, a phrase translated by one of the few functioning bots. What happens now? Helena looked up at the holographic banners of each species hanging above the chamber. Once vibrant symbols, now flickering like dying embers. What happens now, she said. Depends on what kind of story you want history to tell about you. She turned to the Chancellor. The Council will sign a new charter. Not one written by victors, but by survivors. You'll release every enslaved world, dismantle your weapons factories, and open your archives. You'll stop calling sentience a privilege. And you'll stop pretending morality is a commodity. He stared at her, trembling, his translucent veins glowing faint blue. And if we refuse? Helena smiled faintly. Then you'll give me something else to teach the galaxy about. The words were quiet, but they struck harder than any gunfire. The air thrummed. Outside, the tank's targeting arrays flared red before fading again. Every alien in the room understood that line between mercy and annihilation, and how thin it truly was. The Chancellor slumped in his seat, his voice breaking. You can't possibly expect us to rebuild under your supervision. Helena approached him, lowering her voice until only he could hear. Not supervision, she said. Collaboration. But if it helps you sleep, pretend I'm the monster you need to obey. Just remember, humans make better teachers than tyrants. She straightened and faced the rest of the assembly. This is your last chance to be remembered as something better than architects of cruelty. You can either sign this accord or watch the stars go out one by one while we clean up your mess. Her wristpad projected the new treaty in light, lines of text shimmering above her open palm. No one moved. Then, slowly, the Mithra delegate stepped forward and pressed her forelimb to the hologram. Her species emblem lit up beside Earth's. We have children, she said. They deserve to grow without fear. One by one, others followed. The Velar noble hesitated the longest, his reptilian eyes narrow with humiliation. Finally, he pressed his claw to the hologram, muttering, For survival, not surrender. Call it whatever you need to, Helena said. The Draxian warlord came last. He crushed the cube in his hand before signing, molten metal dripping between his claws. We remember who lied to us, he growled. Helena nodded. Then remember who told you the truth. The hologram dimmed. A sound like thunder rolled through the chamber as every ship in orbit, human, alien, neutral, synchronized their beacons to the new treaty's signal. Across the galaxy, light rippled outward, a single pulse of data rewriting centuries of law in seconds. But beneath the triumph was unease. The Chancellor, pale and shaking, looked up at her. You speak of peace, he said quietly. But this is conquest by another name. Helena looked out at the void, her reflection superimposed against the stars. Maybe, she said softly, but sometimes peace needs sharp edges. Then, as if on cue, the chamber lights flickered. A shadow crossed the viewport, something vast, blocking out half the stars. The tanks outside shifted uneasily, their systems whispering warnings in her earpiece. Helena frowned. That's not one of ours. The delegates looked up, faces blanching as the dark shape resolved. A massive dreadnought, alien but not of any known design, emerging from the void. Its hull was black glass and molten gold, etched with shifting symbols older than the council itself. The room erupted into chaos. It's impossible. The Chancellor gasped. That ship was destroyed millennia ago. Helena didn't move. Her HUD scanned the object, flashing red across her visor. Signature. Unknown energy reading. Incomparable identification. Imperial Archive vessel Eidolon. The Mithra drones screamed in harmonic terror. The Velar noble backed away, hissing prayers. Even the Draxian looked shaken. Helena's voice cut through the noise, low and steady. What am I looking at? The Chancellor swallowed. The First Council. The ones who built us. We buried them before your species lit its first fire. Helena's eyes narrowed. Looks like they didn't stay buried. The ship loomed closer, eclipsing the twin suns. Every hull in orbit flickered as its gravity distorted local space. The tank's targeting systems went blind. On her wrist pad, data scrolled like static. They're jamming us, she muttered. The Draxian growled, clutching his blade. If the First Council has returned, none of us are safe. Helena gave a short, humorless laugh. Welcome to humanity's comfort zone. The massive ship stopped just beyond the moon's exosphere. Then, with a voice that was not a sound but a vibration in the bones of every living being, it spoke, ancient, resonant, and cold. Children, you have broken the covenant. Helena froze. The voice wasn't transmitted through speakers. It was inside her skull, the way thunder feels before lightning hits. Around her, delegates clutched their heads in agony. Her tanks roared to life, scanning, recalibrating, readying weapons that suddenly felt like toys against a god. She straightened, her voice steady but low. You picked the wrong class to interrupt. The ship's vast surface shimmered as if smiling. Humanity. We remember you. Helena's grip tightened on her mug until it cracked. Good, she said. Then you remember how this ends. Outside, the stars twisted. The dreadnought's engines flared with the light of creation itself. Helena looked back once at the terrified council, the trembling leaders, the allies and enemies who had all been reduced to witnesses. Then she whispered, almost to herself, Lesson 2. And as the moon's horizon ignited with the reflection of the oncoming blast, her tanks opened their cannons toward the void. The galaxy held its breath.